Good morning. Good morning. As we can get seated, we'll get started here. Good morning to all of you and all of those that are joining us from the world. Have any prayer concerns? I know Patty moved. You can get that in the bulletin. And I think that's her new address? It is. Okay. The one that's in the bulletin is Patty's new address where she is. Alex moved her Friday? Yeah.
Friday afternoon, yes.
Okay.
Friday morning.
Any others?
And she fell yesterday, but she didn't get hurt. So.
Okay. Probably a few others still not feeling too well, so need to remember them. Shall we pray? Most holy and righteous Father, we thank you for this time to be here this morning, for many things you've done for us, and help us to remember them, Father, and to give you the thanks for them, for those blessings, Father. And Father, be with those that are not here, that are not feeling well, and help them to recover, Father, and to regain their strength. Father, be with us all always as we study your word, Father, and help us to grow in our studies, to grow closer to you and understand your will for us and to live that will, Father, for you, and to let our light shine wherever we may be. Father, be with us through this study, especially that we use it correctly, Father, that we understand it, what you have to say to us. And for we ask these things, Father, in Jesus' name, let us all say amen. Okay, so we started one last week that was kind of called the Humanity of Christ. The study got a ways through it, and what it was, we have the fruits of Christ's humanity. We got the fruits. It's a family united in holiness, one spiritual nature is what we had, and then a family confirmed as brethren. That's kind of a big thing to realize that we are now a family, and when he talks about brethren, he's talking about us, all of us, and we also are now a family of brethren that are of Abraham's seed in that sense too, because we are recipients of that promise that was given to Abraham years ago, that through his seed all nations would be blessed. And we are that seed, and we're kind of the Jews, if you want to me it's a little easier we're the Israelites of today. Christians are the Israelites of today. We're his family. We're of that family. And so we were also a family that we were confirmed as brethren. Psalms 22:22 was a main verse that we looked at. And then a family of humanity who puts their trust in God. That's what being part of this family is trusting in God. We trust in God. That's what his family does. I talked about that. Then we went to the mission of Christ's humanity, and that's kind of where we are this morning. That I'm going to see what my first slide here is. Okay, the mission of Christ's humanity. That's what we're going to be talking about, his mission, for a little bit. First of all, he came to vanquish the power of the devil. That was the first thing he came to do. And that was verse 14 of chapter 2 of Hebrews, that he talks about that. Yeah, so he says, inasmuch then as the children have partaken of flesh and blood, he himself likewise shared in the same, that through death he might destroy him who had the power of death, that is, the devil. So he came to vanquish the power of the devil. That's what the devil had power over. And it meant a lot. It's a lot. It's a whole, we're going to talk about this, but the power that the devil has, and you can talk to people that aren't Christians, and they're afraid to die. They don't want to die. They do anything and everything they can not to die. Whereas we look forward to that. And I want to say there's going to, maybe it's next week's, that we'll talk about it when we come back to some of this. Remember, Paul says, I can't remember exactly how he says it, but he ends up saying, yeah, I would rather die and go and be with Jesus, but I know that basically it's better for me right now to be here and do his work. But he's ready to die and move on. So the devil has that power over us that we're always afraid to die until we come to know Christ and become part of his family. And it changes our thoughts. So the writer here assures us that just as surely as we became flesh and blood, Jesus also shared in our humanity. And we're going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about that, his humanity, and a little bit more than what maybe we think about it, generally speaking. So this verse also informs us that he was born to die. He was born so he would die and have in his death. And it tells us why he had to die. In that verse, it's so that through the death of his human nature, he could destroy Satan's hold on the human family. And he did that by, when he was resurrected, came out of the grave, he showed that there is life after death. And the devil no longer has that control. Colossians 2:15, having disarmed principalities and powers, that's the ones of this nature of the devil, so forth. He made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them in it. In going to his death on the cross, he showed they no longer had a hold on us, on Christians. And then next thing was verse 15, where he says, and release those who through fear of death were all their lifetime subjected to bondage. Well, it probably reads a little different, but were subjected to bondage. Release those who through fear of death were all their lifetime subject to bondage. That bondage that the devil had on us. So he's freeing us from that slavery of fear. And 15. The sin on man's part had given Satan a stranglehold on humanity. We're talking about the sin of Adam and Eve. This is where it started. And Jesus paid our debt caused by sin and thus eliminated the devil's claim on us. So he paid that debt, that sacrifice that had to be made for us to pay that debt of what Adam and Eve had done. So when did Christ become a man? 2 reasons. For conquest, he destroyed the devil, the arch enemy of man. Now, he destroyed him in his power over death. He didn't destroy him in the sense that, okay, he's now not here anymore. He doesn't have anything to do, in his tempting of us. He doesn't have that power. He can tempt us, but we now have a way to, what do you want to say, not overcome our temptations. One, overcome them. Two, if we are tempted and we submit to them, that we can have them cleansed.
You destroy the power or the devil or the hold that the devil had on us.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And then it was, so why did Christ become a man? Two reasons. For a conquest, he destroyed the devil, the archenemy of man, and for delivery. He has delivered man from the fear of death. He's delivered us from that and delivered us back to being in the family of God. That's just a fear that is with us, is with mankind until they accept Christ.
I know it says he overcame death. He rose on the third day. What about those who died before him?
Before him, that were in,
They were in the bondage of death.
okay, well, I think we need to clarify who we're talking about, those.
Mankind.
Mankind, all of mankind?
All mankind. He destroyed death.
If they hadn't accepted God and been followers of God. Now, I think there's two different things that were going on before Jesus. I think there was a law to the Israelites that they had to follow, and those that followed it and died are going to be the same. And then you got the Gentiles that I think they had a law, and they knew it. And we don't read anything about this, but until we find like Cornelius in the New Testament, and then there was a couple other people that are mentioned that were Gentiles that were followers, or they tried to follow God in some way. Not as Israelites, what they had to do, that law, but a law they had that God had given. And it would be also the same law that all those had before Abraham, or before Moses and the Ten Commandments and all that. And all those people, all of them, I believe, that are what I'm pretty sure happened, that when Jesus died on the cross, his sins went back and covered all those people. They go to heaven, whereas the ones that were non-followers, they do the same thing that sinful people today place go. If that clears it. Alex?
As we get to Hebrews chapter 11, it talks about the faithful of the past. And I believe that those that were righteous in God's sight, faithful in obedience to him, that Jesus' death on the cross, as you said, covers those sins of the past. But it's faithfulness and righteousness that makes them right in God's sight, and they attain that blood of Jesus Christ. So we get to chapter 11, that becomes
Okay.
evident, where you talk about the hall of fame of faith, and what made them righteous was their obedience and faithfulness to God.
Just in a nutshell, for those, Alex is saying that if you didn't hear that chapter 11, the chapter of faith, that a lot of this will be answered about those people that weren't of the Jewish faith, I guess you would say.
What I'm trying to figure out, I believe that I know, is what covers the world. But when he died, he rose
It's kind of hard to comprehend, but they,
Kind of trying to clarify that, I was going to ask the same question, should we have no fear of death? We walk down the center of the street,
there is an inkling that they did have a understanding of the fear of after death. There was something. There's some verses here and there throughout the Old Testament that ascribe to that thought, that they did have some understanding or some thought. They just didn't know the whole ramifications of it. Do you want to say something, Alex?
Well, I was going to say, in Luke, we see the rich man and Lazarus, and the Lazarus in Abraham's bosom, and description of paradise and torment and Hades. So that's a good indicator that the people of the past were covered by Jesus' sin as well, and their righteousness and faithfulness counted for something, that they inherited paradise. You know, that not everybody was lost in the Old Testament.
And remember that all these sacrifices, let me finish this then. All these sacrifices that the people of Israel had done before Christ, it didn't cover them up or wash them away. It just kind of, the thing I've always heard is rolled them forward, so that when Jesus did shed his blood and raise, they were then washed away. That's what I'm pretty sure happened. Okay, John.
So I look over in chapter 9, verses 15, it reads, it says, for this reason he has been mediator of the new covenant, in order, since the death has taken place with the redemption of transgressions, that we were committed to the first covenant. Those who have been called may receive a promise of eternal inheritance.
Okay, that was Romans 9,
9:15.
9:15.
Hebrews.
Hebrews 9, okay. Hebrews 9:15. There's a lot of things which I'm going to refer also in some of this stuff. You're going to say something here, like in chapter 2 or 3, that will be cleared up in chapter 6, 7, or following. So we need to, we're going to have some patience, I guess, in it. What?
That's what I want to know right now.
Yeah, uh-huh. Well, yeah, we can't jump over there, read that, and figure out. So anyway, I guess stay with us and see where it goes. So Luke 7, for delivery, in this part, for delivery, he has delivered man from the fear of death. Luke 1:74 says, to grant us that we, being delivered from the hand of our enemies, might serve him without fear. So he delivered us from our enemies. The enemies being the devil and his followers, I guess. They might serve him so that they can serve him without fear. And then, so when Jesus went to the tomb on our behalf and came forth out of the tomb victorious, he was accepted as the sacrifice that would cover our transgressions and make it possible for God's grace to flood our lives. Once he did that, it made it possible for us to receive God's grace, which God gave us his grace. Okay, now that's done. Now, even though you've done the wrong thing, I'm going to forgive that. Yeah. So another thing that happened under this was that the object of Christ's mission of redemption was that the physical verse 16 actually is what it is. Verse 16 says, for indeed if we do not give aid to angels, but he does not give aid to angels, but he does give aid to the seed of Abraham. Now, we are the seed of Abraham, like I said a little while ago. And he came to give us aid, not the angels. The physical descendants of Abraham, that's the Jews, give aid to them, but we have become part of that family now. Jesus did not come to help angels. I don't know why. Well, I think I do. Well, I'm going to tell you this. Angels have rebelled against God, lost their relationship with God. They did almost the same thing that mankind did. But as far as the book of Hebrews is concerned, there's no redemption for angels or any place else do we find that, a redemption for angels. Now, what I believe is that there isn't is because they were with God. At one time, they were with God and saw the things of heaven. They were there, they saw the things, but just like the devil, they wanted more. They wanted something else. And so, like the devil was thrown out of heaven, so were they. And I think we've talked about it before, that the devil was an angel at one time, and then was dismissed from heaven. So that's what I believe. And because they were there and they saw it all, and they had a different, you could say, well, Adam and Eve saw it too, being in the garden, but I don't think it was quite heaven, what they saw. They were in the garden, and of course this is our mankind thinking, that a garden is this beautiful place to be in, nice, quiet, serene, but heaven is more than that. And these angels saw that. And they were partakers of, but yet for some way they wanted more. That's just my thoughts
Now,
on.
is that every angel?
No,
No,
only some.
only some.
Yeah, because God still has his angels
That's what I thought.
there, but these other principalities and things, that one was the devil. I'm pretty sure either they were angels or there's something else that we aren't told, and they all went. So that's just speculation. So anyway, Christ's mission was to redeem us, to bring us back to God. Because God, what does John 3:16 say? For God so loved the world. That is a big love. When the more you think about it, the more it is. You can see it. That why would God love somebody? We can look at it in our human manners. How long do we, or how much do we love somebody that, let's say, is outside our family? We'll start there. How easy it is for us to love them when they have done us wrong. It really stretches us to do that. Now let's think about a child of our own or somebody in our family. They do something to us. I don't know that it takes quite as much, but if they keep on continually doing things that you don't think are right or whatever. I read these books, and they put these people that have, like children, they're out getting into problems with drugs and alcohol and whatever, stealing, everything, keep getting thrown in jail. And they keep getting them out. But sometimes, how much do you put up with? How often do you bail them out? Well, there might come a time when say, okay, I'm not going to bail you out anymore. You're on your own. That's our human thought. That's not God's thought. He loved us so much that he will keep on forgiving us. And we were doing that. We've been mankind has been living that way until Jesus came. He said, okay, here's your solution. Is Jesus and what he did. Because like John 3:16 says, because he loved us, for God so loved us, that he did that. Kathy?
But I told my kids all their lives, there is nothing on the face of this earth that they can do to make me not love them. But I've learned through the years, having children and having them, that there comes a point where, like you said, I love you, therefore I'm going to let you figure this out on your own. But I can't make you believe, I can't make you be the person I know you to be. And it worked with one, I'm praying it works with the other, but it's just one of those things. You still love them. You love them with all your heart. I'd still die for any of them. But I'm also not going to empower them to continue to do mine.
Yeah. Uh-huh. So, so that's verse 16. The physical descendants of Abraham, the Jews, are the ones he's talking about. And I think us too. We become Jews in our conversion to Christ, in our baptism, along about that point. Jesus did not come to help angels. We've gone through that. And then, so the next thing, Christ's function. This is the next big section. His function in his mission and what he was coming to do, his function. His humanity qualified him to do this. In verse 17, he says, therefore, in all things he had to be made like his brethren, that he might be a merciful and faithful high priest in things pertaining to God to make propitiation for the sins of the people. He had to be made like us. And it's going to be I never thought of this. What I'm going to tell you right now what I'd read here. It says, not only physical, but also emotional. Never really thought of that emotional part. Always knew about the physical things he went through, but we have an emotional part, and he went through the same thing with that as us. In this verse 17, the author is making a different statement about the humanity of Christ from the one that was presented in verse 14 earlier. There he was made flesh and blood, but in verse 17 he is made in every way like his brothers. He had emotions just like us. Thoughts, same thoughts type things that we have. So, and we knew physically, you lived physically, sure, but the emotional part I never really thought about. But he had to be like us in that manner too. So, let's see what we got. So not only physical, but also emotional. He had the same hurts and pains and feelings, the same appetites, the same zest for life. He didn't want to die. We saw that when he said, Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. But not my will, but yours be done. So he had the same feelings and appetites that we have, and the same zest for life. The same urge for survival that you and I possess. In other words, he was as much a man physically, flesh and blood, as you and I, but he was also as much emotionally as you and I. So, gives it.
You mentioned
Yes.
there was two reasons that Christ came. I think this is the third. So he did be the perfect mediator.
Yeah. And like you're saying, to be the perfect mediator, he had to be that. to replace, we're going to get to this here in a little bit too, I think a little bit later, about being the high priest that he was. He had to have suffered, gone through everything like us that a human being would be, so that he was the perfect high priest later on to be that. So he can, we can go to Jesus, pray to him, and he knows what it feels like. He knows how it is. And he is able then to tell the Father, look, they were doing everything they could to overcome this. I'm just kind of paraphrasing, making this up. I don't know what he's going to say or how he's going to say it, but look, they were doing everything they could. He's going to be like the super lawyer in heaven for us. And to tell them that, no, they are good. Their heart is good. So he is made just like us. And then two great benefits that grow out of Jesus' physical and emotional identification with the human family is, first, Jesus became a faithful and merciful high priest in service to God. I got a little ahead of myself. And second, he made purifications for the sins of the people. He was that perfect sacrifice. He made purification for us. His blood, there was no reason for him to be sacrificed. And then he qualifies as a priest, serve both God and man. Then as a priest, he has two qualities. He is faithful and merciful, faithful to God and merciful to man. In Hebrews 5, chapter 5, verses 1 through 10, you can read of that. So we're going to get to that, one of those things later on. And also he's faithful and, oops, that's not where I wanted to go. He was faithful, merciful, faithful to God in chapter 3, verses 1 and 2. You can read it out. And he was merciful in verse 17 of chapter 2. He says, therefore, in all things he had to be made like his brethren, and that he might be merciful and faithful high priest. So he was going to be both of those. And to God, the merciful man, in verse 17, and then merciful to man, chapter 5, verses 1 through 10. And as a high priest, he is able to make atonement for the sins of the people. So he can make the atonement. Yes.
You have Hebrews 5, 1 through 10, I think verse 15 in that same chapter 5 says, for we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who has been tempted in all things as we are, yet without sin. So that's where the faithfulness and mercifulness comes into play. And that gives me comfort to know that he's been tempted in all ways as I have, but yet he's carried all of my sins to take them away. He's went to the cross
Yeah.
to do that.
And if you go back to Matthew, I want to say 4, where he's tempted, the 3 temptations, and each of those temptations tempts him in a certain way. Those 3 things, the desire for power, the desire of our flesh to have money and so forth. I can't think of it. There's 3 things, and they're listed someplace, and I always forget where it is. What is it? We're getting going down the line here.
Lust of the eye, lust of the flesh.
Yeah, lust of the eye, lust of flesh, and lust of what? Could be. Oh. The what? James is where it is, yeah. James, about chapter 2, I think it is. So, each one of those temptations that Jesus went through was one of those, is what it is. Yeah. Yeah. I thought I knew where it was on what page it was too, on the page. But I don't see it. In chapter 2, verse 4. Okay, well, somebody will find it someplace, sometime. So anyway, moving on. That his humanity qualifies him. Atonement. The word atonement is, in sacrificial terminology, means to cover or to make satisfaction. That's what atonement means. And that's atonement for the sins of the people. The Hebrews, as well as Greeks, would tell us this is the Hebrew. John?
That's in chapter 1 of James, verses 13 and 16.
Okay.
It's also in 1 John 2:16. It says, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life comes not from the Father, but from the world.
Okay, 1 John 2:16?
Yep.
Okay, and James 1,
13 and 16.
13 and 16. Okay. So you kind of find it in those places. That's those three type temptations. And so the Hebrew and Greek, meaning the Hebrew word and the Greek word, would tell us he paid the price for human reconciliation. In other words, he paid the penalty for human sin. He gave God satisfaction. Therefore, God is now able to grant redemption unto those of the human family and that believe in Christ because of his sacrifice. So because of that, what Jesus did, he paid that penalty for the human sin, that it gave God now satisfaction that he could pour out his grace on us. He's able to give us redemption unto the human family, whereas he couldn't do that before because man had sin, remember, and we can't come into his presence, come to him with sin in our lives. Sin cannot exist in the presence of God. No. So it had to be wiped away, so it gave him satisfaction for that, and now we could go. Is that a raised arm or just moving? Okay. So it gave him satisfaction, gave God the satisfaction for that he paid that penalty. And it's just so much that when you combine, Jesus making that, when he was in heaven with God, when the three of them were together, he made that decision. I'd say he made the decision, I will go and do this. I will go and take care of that for them. So now, his suffering and temptation qualify him because, this is verse 18, it says, for in that he himself has suffered, being tempted, he is able to aid those who are tempted. So because he was tempted, just like we are, he's able to help us who are tempted. You watch these shows all the time, and the bad guys always say, everybody has a price. It's saying, as far as money, They want to buy your business. Everybody has their price. What's your price? What will you do to, I'll pay you so much to do this. How much do I have to pay you? And that's what we're kind of talking about, that he paid that price, the price that had to be paid. That was the price that was required to get mankind back to God. And then the great suffering and the temptation of Christ, you see in Matthew chapter 4. The high price of Christ's sinlessness was see in Hebrews 12:3 and 4, where it says, For consider him who endured such hostility from sinners against himself, lest you become weary and discouraged in your souls. You have not yet resisted to bloodshed, striving against sin. The great, let's see, he was slandered. So the great suffering and temptation, and further the writer invites his readers to consider Jesus as he endured such opposition from sinful men. He endured it from us. They, were questioning him all the time, trying to get him to sin, trying everything they could to trap him. So, and then he was slandered and endured opposition, but he maintained his integrity and innocence. He resisted to the point of blood. He resisted to the point of hurt, to the point of pain, even to the point of death. He resisted that. And something else. Back in the verse 18, yep, not what I'm looking for. What I'm thinking of is, if you remember back, started chapter 2, a lot of what he's saying is, maybe it's the end of chapter 1, that not neglect such salvation, that don't drift away. That it's real easy to drift away. And it's like you're out in a stream. If you're just sitting there in your boat, paddle boat, whatever you're in, if you're just sitting there doing nothing, you're drifting. And that's what he's saying. If you aren't doing anything, it's easy to drift down the stream. You got to be working, just to stay where you are in the spot. You have to be doing some paddling, some working, striving to stay there. And he's saying, we need to be striving, we need to work out. We can't not stop moving. Former teacher, a teacher that we knew one time, taught in the public schools, when she retired, they wanted her to teach a Bible class for kids. She didn't want to do it because she said, I'm retired. I'm tired of teaching. Well, in Christianity, there is no retirement. If you retire, you're just sitting there floating, drifting, and it's too easy to drift away. You have to kind of work at this. So, I want to finish this up. So he resisted to the point of his death. He resisted that far. And then his attitude must have been, better to lose an arm than to sin. Better to lose both arms than to violate my mission. Better to lose my life than to sacrifice my integrity. That was his thought. And he was sinless by choice, not by divine manipulation. Divine manipulation would have been that when he was tempted by the devil there in chapter 4, he could have said, or even when he was 40 days and 40 nights before that, he was, what, fasting. He could have said, I think I'll have some, give me some food, right, to help me get through this, or something of that nature. He would have stopped the devil with, like we see in these movies, he'd throw up his hands and the devil would have been stopped. But he didn't. He didn't do that. He never used his godly powers, or that he had when he was in heaven. He didn't use those on earth. In fact, he gave them up when he came here on earth. He did not use those here. And then it says he was just as susceptible to temptation as we. It was just as easy for him to commit sin as it would be for us. Remember that thought. Just as easy for him to commit sin as for us. Any questions, comments, whatever? Next week, well, you can think about it. I'm going to study this first. Next week, we're going to go back to pretty much to where Alex left off a couple of weeks ago, and start looking at each verse individually. And that was at about verse 9. And we'll go through that, finish that up. So any questions, comments? Okay, thank you.